So we've looked at Nazis' attempt to control the church and how that created opposition. Now let's take a further look at opposition to Nazi rule and the kind of opposition they faced. It came primarily from the youth and the church. So opposition was generally controlled through fear, persecution, and persuasion. So some of the youth opposition that the Nazi faces comes from the youth, because not all people accept Nazi indoctrination. Young people tend to have a more, rebellious spirit. They've not got young families to care about and things like that. They tend to try to believe in a more idyllic world and more freedoms. So that's why much of the opposition the Nazis face comes from the youth. For example, the Edelweiss Pirates, their logo being that Edelweiss flower in the background. Many gangs became part of this national resistance group. They use the flower as their emblem, and they resist. It doesn't always have to be over the top, actually fighting and arguing with Nazis, but they resist by wearing Western fashion, going on hikes, as in avoiding Hitler youth groups, or avoiding joining Hitler youth groups, and then they would meet up with other groups and beat up the Hitler youth. During World War II, they gathered and helped distribute propaganda leaflets dropped by Britain and the USA, putting them through people's letterboxes, giving shelter to deserters who refused to fight for the Nazis. And in 1944, a group of the Edelweiss Pirates killed the head of the Cologne Gestapo, Cologne being a place in Germany. They killed the head of the Cologne Gestapo and were hanged as a result of it. So you can see there the type of resistance that, how resistance manifests itself, ranges from simply refusing to conform, refusing to dress how the Nazis tell you to, refusing to dress in the traditional Germanic way, right through to political assassination. Another group which resisted was the swing youth. They resist by listening to jazz music, which is a problem for the Nazis because jazz music has its origins in African slavery and isn't traditional Germanic music, and therefore is hated by the Nazis. The swing youth consisted mainly of wealthy middle-class teenagers from big towns who admire American culture, which was supposed to be censored. They played illegally imported swing music, and smoking, drinking, and dancing. They were seen as rebels. Think of this as sort of like a rave culture of its time. Illegally arranged dances, which saw attendances of up to 6,000, and some preferred jazz. They called the jazz youth, for example, Louis Armstrong. So whilst it might not seem like much to us now, what's the big deal? You listen to music you shouldn't listen to, and you organise parties that you shouldn't organise. This is non-conformism. It's refusing to do what the Nazis tell you, and therefore is resistance. Himmler said that any young people, he's the head of the SS, remember, Himmler says any young people who listen to jazz should be beaten, given the severest exercise, and then put to hard labour. That's how much they don't like this. Effectively, why is this such a problem for the Nazis? Because all the time these young people spend doing these things, smoking, drinking, attending dances they shouldn't do, listening to Western music, listening to Western influences, going up mountains and hikes with other resistance groups, all the time they spend doing this is time out of the Hitler Youth. It's time where the Nazis can't indoctrinate them. Okay, so that's why they're seen as a threat, and they don't want this to spread to other youth groups because it will make it harder for the Nazis to indoctrinate. Other opposition comes from the church. As mentioned earlier, you've got Pastor Martin Niemöller, who was a U-boat commander in World War I. He became a pastor in 1924. In 1933, he welcomed Nazism initially because he thought it was a good thing and it would reverse the Treaty of Versailles. However, when the Reich churches set up under the Nazis, he saw it as blasphemous. And in 1934, he establishes the rival Confessional Church. So that's when we see that split in the Protestant church. Publicly speaks out against Nazism, and in July 1937, he was arrested and given 7 months imprisonment. Once out, he simply continues to oppose Hitler, so he's rearrested and put in a concentration camp. In 1938, he was made a personal prisoner of the Führer. That just means he sought high security or a person of interest in the camp. It doesn't mean he literally was kept in a little, closet at Hitler's house as a prisoner. He survived and then was later released by the Allies. Further resistance comes from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who spoke out against Hitler, criticizing the Nazis' racial policies and their attempts to control the German church. In 1933, just 2 days after Hitler became Chancellor, Bonhoeffer gave a radio address warning about the dangers of a leader becoming an idol, effectively warning against the dangers of idolatry, as in putting someone other than Jesus or God above yourself. The broadcast was cut off mid-speech, and he later became a leader in the Confessional Church, a movement that resisted the Nazis' efforts to control Christians. He later becomes part of a secret mission to smuggle Jews out of Germany to Switzerland, and this act of resistance led to his arrest in 1943, and in April 1945, just weeks before the World War ended, Bonhoeffer was executed at a concentration camp. Again, remembering the stories of these martyrs galvanizes opposition to the Nazis. Okay, it's very difficult to reduce people's Christian faith, because the more you push back against them, the more martyrs you create, and the more that galvanizes or influences or increases opposition to yourself. Then the final one, St. Maximilian Kolbe. Before his arrest, he used his monastery as a centre for anti-Nazi resistance, published Catholic newspapers and magazines that spoke out against Nazi ideology and promote Christian values. After the German invasion of Poland in 1939, he opened his monasteries to refugees, including about 2,000 Jews. The problem with this is that puts him directly in conflict with Nazi authorities. He is given opportunities to work with the Nazi-approved church, but he refuses. He continues to preach against totalitarianism, as in a dictatorship, and insists on remaining loyal to Catholic teachings. Therefore, Kolbe was arrested by the Gestapo in February 1941 and sent to Auschwitz. In July that same year, a prisoner escaped from Auschwitz, so the Nazis selected 10 men who were confirmed to die by starvation as their punishment. One of the men chosen for this execution cried out about his wife and his children, so Kolbe volunteered to die instead in his place. He then is sent to the starvation chamber, where he leads prayers for the next 10 days, basically accepting his fate, but not giving up on his faith. Eventually, the Nazis kill him with a lethal injection of carbolic acid on August 14, 1941. His resistance is rooted in Christian self-sacrifice and shows defiance against Nazi oppression. His act of offering his life became one of the most powerful examples of moral resistance against the Nazis.